conquered an area, there would often be, unless they surrendered, there would be a big battle with lots of people killed. Those who were not killed were often enslaved, and those who were on the Roman side would then offer to become a client of the Romans. And being a client of the Romans had, various degrees of how keen you were. But one way to show how keen you were was to build temples to Roman gods, to the emperor, and to the imperial family. Now, you could just build a temple and leave it at that. You could have a temple with sacrifices. You could have sacrifices for the emperor, or you could have sacrifices to the emperor. There's a famous story of a temple to Augustus in Spain, and they had an altar, and they reported to the emperor, like, there's an amazing miracle that has happened. A palm branch has grown out through the altar where they do the sacrifices, and it's growing up. And we thought the emperor would be very impressed. And the Emperor Augustus wasn't impressed, because he said, well, it goes to show how often they put any fire on it. Because if they were regularly making sacrifices, nothing would be able to grow there. So he was more bemused than he was impressed with the palm branch growing up out of it. Now, with the imperial cult, it was wide-ranging. It was all about integrating yourself within the echelons of power within the Roman Empire, so that you were a team player, part of the game. You wanted the benefaction of the Romans and the imperial family. And it was also the test then of civic loyalty. And as Milek pointed out, if when they wanted to find someone who was a Christian, they would get them to deny Christ and offer a pinch of incense towards an image of the emperor. That was how they got you. If you refused to do that, you would get in a lot of trouble. The other thing you've got to remember, that the imperial cult wasn't always imposed. Often it was something that people wanted to do, and they were enthusiastic about it. This is what seems to have got Paul in a little bit of trouble in places like Thessalonica, certainly in the churches of Asia Minor during the time that John is writing his book of Revelation. That seems to be one of the big problems. The other thing I want to say about the imperial cults is every group was able to participate in some way except for one. And that group was the Jews, because they were not going to build temples to the emperor in Judea. Herod the Great ringed Judea with imperial temples. He built them in non-Jewish territories around Judea in Galilee. So what the compromise was with the Jews, rather than offer sacrifices to the emperor in the temple, they would offer sacrifices on behalf of the emperor at the Jerusalem temple. That was kind of the compromise. And one of the reasons the war kicked off in 66 AD is when a group of priests said they would no longer offer sacrifices on behalf of the emperor at the temple. That was the equivalent of a declaration of war. We don't want to be part of your gang anymore. Now, Christians had an ambivalent relationship with the emperor. At one level, you've got Paul, who appeals to Caesar to get free. Tertullian in the 2nd century could say, look, we're happy to call Caesar Lord in a political sense or in a civic sense. We just can't worship him in a religious sense. Okay, so there was various degrees of how you could negotiate the Roman Empire. And many Christians said, look, we are some of the best citizens you have. We don't cause any problems. If you give us a little bit of religious freedom, we'll be some of the best people in your empire. And in many cases, what they wanted was a degree of religious freedom to practice their religion, to promote their way of life without being persecuted by imperial authorities. So some Christians would be hiding from the emperor or from the imperial authorities, or in some cases they were hoping that the emperor would have a change of mind, or at least have a kind of don't ask, don't tell policy when it comes to the Christians. It's interesting in Bithynia, when Pliny is writing to Trajan saying, what do I do? I mean, everyone's being like, nominated as a Christian, like this guy's a Christian, that guy's a Christian. People are like, accusing each other left, right, and center. And he was told, look, well, don't believe any report you find, but if you do come across someone who's a Christian, ask them if they are, ask them again, ask them if they really, really want to be a Christian, and if they won't recant of their obnoxious superstition, then kill them. That was basically it'll give them every chance to deny their faith, but if they're really, really going to be out and proud about it, that's where you've kind of got to deal with them. Yeah, so that's some of the interesting aspects of the Roman Empire. Now, can everyone repeat after me? Say, Ho Jesus Kyrios.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Kaiser Uk.
Kaiser Uk.
That means Jesus is Lord, Caesar is not. So you all got that? And you could argue when Paul was calling Jesus Lord, there may have been a subtle or not so subtle implication that that Jesus alone is Lord in the ultimate sense. One of the debates in Pauline scholarship, is there an anti-imperial aspect to Paul's theology, Paul's teaching? Now, I think it is. I don't think Paul is running around the empire going hashtag down with Caesar or anything like that. But, you know, Paul can say something like at the end of Romans that the root of Jesse will rise up to rule over the nations, which is not really benign because there already was someone ruling over the nations. And who is going to be the true ruler of the world? Will it be the son of Augustus or the son of David? Will it be the Sebastos or that's the emperor, or the Kurios of the Christians? So yeah, I think there is a kind of subtle implied critique of the idolatrous dimension of the imperial cult in a lot of Paul's letters. And that's one thing you've got to make about. And you've got to remember how much the world would have been saturated with images of the emperors, their family, former emperors. So it would have been everywhere. Like, if you've ever been through places in the Middle East where you can see pictures of like like Sadat in Egypt, or whoever it was, just images of them everywhere. It was kind of like that with the emperors. They would have little shrines to them. People would have pictures of the imperial family in their houses. Particularly the more Romanized it was, the more you would get these visual displays of the local emperor, and the more cities would be keen to ingratiate themselves to the various echelons of political power. So, yeah, any questions on that?